Let's talk about the very first person to look at the world around him, at the great wars and clashing empires, and ask a question that changed everything. Why? This is the story of the man who basically invented a new way of understanding our past, something we now call history.
I mean, it's a question we're still asking today, right? But imagine this. 2,500 years ago, this exact question sent one man on an incredible journey across the entire known world. And in his search for an answer, he created something that would outlive every single one of those empires.
And that man's name was Herodotus. Born way back in the 5th century BC, he grew up smack in the middle of this epic, world-defining clash between the Greek city-states and the absolutely colossal Persian Empire. Now, he wasn't a king, he wasn't a general. Think of him more like an investigator, a storyteller, who was just dead set on figuring out the truth. So, Herodotus, he comes from this well-off family, living in a town that's actually under Persian control. He could have just lived a comfortable, quiet life, but he couldn't. He was totally consumed by this massive conflict that was shaping his entire world. And that personal connection gave him this one single, burning question. And that one simple question? It became the foundation of his entire life's work, a masterpiece we now know as the Histories. But look, this wasn't just a bunch of cool stories, no way. This was the world's first great historical investigation. It was a genuine attempt to trace this war all the way back to its absolute beginning. Okay, so where do you even begin an investigation that huge? Well, Herodotus started with the oldest leads he could find. He literally traveled to Persia, sat down with their wise men, and asked, okay guys, where did this all start? And they told him a story that went way, way back, all the way to the age of myths. According to the Persians, it was this long cycle of revenge, a tit-for-tat series of kidnappings of royal women. It started with Io, then the Greeks grabbed Europa, then they took Medea, and the whole thing blew up when Paris stole Helen, kicking off the Trojan War. So from their point of view, the Greeks had been the aggressors for a long, long time. But for Herodotus, this just wasn't enough. And right here, this is a massive turning point in human thought. Herodotus listened to the myths, sure, but then he heard that the Phoenicians had a totally different version of the story. He needed something more solid, something he could actually point to and say, this is where the real trouble began. This demand for verifiable evidence? It was absolutely revolutionary. So, this hunt for a real cause brings us to the first person Herodotus actually blames for starting the fight, King Croesus of Lydia. This was a man so ridiculously wealthy, his name literally became a synonym for rich. And his story? Well, it's a classic tragedy about pride and a huge warning about messing with fate. The story goes that the wise philosopher Solon paid Croesus a visit. The king, showing off all his treasures, asked Solon, "Am I not the happiest man alive?" And Solon just says, "Nope." Instead, he named some humble guy who lived a good life and died bravely for his city. Solon's point was a deep one. Count no man happy until he is dead. Croesus, well, he just brushed off Solon's advice. Later on, he gets it in his head to attack the rising Persian Empire. But before he does, he checks in with the famous Oracle of Delphi. And the prophecy he gets back is powerful, all right, but it's also dangerously tricky. And, well, here's the tragic twist. Croesus attacks, gets completely crushed by the Persian king Cyrus, and the great empire he ended up destroying was his own. Standing on his own funeral pyre, he finally got what Solon was trying to tell him. For Herodotus, this was it. This was the first verifiable act of aggression that set the stage for everything to come. To really get a handle on the main players in this conflict, Herodotus knew he had to see their worlds for himself. So he traveled for years, basically weaving together this incredible, colorful quilt of ancient cultures. He became as much of an anthropologist as a historian, writing down the customs of everyone he met, because he believed you couldn't possibly understand a war unless you understood the people who were fighting it. For instance, he noted that the Persians worshiped their gods on mountaintops, not inside temples. He saw that they greeted each other with a kiss, but where they kissed you depended on your social rank. And for them, the two most shameful things you could possibly do were to lie or to be in debt. Then in Babylon, he recorded some truly wild customs, like they preserved their dead in honey.
He also described this annual marriage market where the most beautiful women were auctioned off to husbands, and the profits were used to create dowries for women who were considered less attractive. And in Egypt, he found a world that must have seemed totally upside down to a Greek. Men stayed home to weave, women went out to the markets. He wrote about their incredible love for cats. If a family cat died, everyone in the house would shave their eyebrows in mourning. And of course, he gave us this amazing, detailed account of their complex 70-day mummification process. So this whole investigation, the ancient myths, the tragic king, this grand tour of foreign cultures, it was all building towards one massive event, the climax of the entire story, the Great Greco-Persian Wars, the very conflict that got him started on this whole quest in the first place. Herodotus' account gives us the legendary clashes that would define Western civilization. He tells us about the shocking Athenian victory at Marathon, then the heroic doomed last stand at Thermopylae, the brilliant naval trap at Salamis that crippled the Persian fleet, and finally, kicking the Persians out for good at Plataea. It's the ultimate story of a small coalition standing up to a global superpower. And of all those battles, there's none that captures our imagination quite like Thermopylae. I mean, come on. You have this tiny force of Greeks, led by just 300 Spartans, holding this narrow mountain pass against a Persian army so huge, Herodotus claims it numbered in the millions. The pure defiance of this moment is just legendary. When the Persian king Xerxes told the Spartans to lay down their weapons, their king, Leonidas, supposedly shot back with this simple reply. It perfectly sums up that Greek spirit of "we will not back down." Now, the Spartans at Thermopylae were eventually wiped out, but their sacrifice bought precious time for the rest of the Greeks. Later, the Greeks tricked the Persian navy into a disaster at the Battle of Salamis and then delivered the final knockout blow on land at Plataea. Somehow, against all odds, they had pushed back the invasion and saved their freedom. So, in the end, Herodotus found the answer to his question. He traced the causes of the war all the way from myth to the pride of a single king, to the final epic conflict. But in the process of answering why, he ended up doing something so much more important. He created an entirely new way of understanding the world. And this right here, this is his real legacy. The very word we use, history, comes from the Greek word Herodotus himself used to describe what he was doing, historia. And get this, it doesn't just mean the past, it means inquiry. It means knowledge you get by investigating. It's the art of asking questions, of traveling, of interviewing people, and weighing the evidence. He didn't just tell stories, he invented the method for finding them. And that is what he left us with. Herodotus taught us that to understand where we are now, we have to investigate how we got here. He was the first to build a whole new field of knowledge around that simple question: why? And in doing that, he gave us the tools to understand ourselves. It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? If no one had ever bothered to start asking why, how would we even begin to understand our world today?